witnessed the world burst from the fires of heaven. I watched as it decayed into this wretched place.
They drink deeply and forget their names, their purpose, replacing their beliefs with falsehoods.
No monsters, no gods, only oblivion.
Together we will find glimpses of what makes them human.
I still reach for her in the middle of a cold night, but there is only the echo of her left.
What difference does it make which master we serve? We will serve all the same.
There is no need for the agonies of the living when ascension awaits.
Fate is not ours to defy, only to fulfill.
There is only you, unborn. Prepare, for I shall test you.
You seem different, untouched by false truths. Bring the glands back to me.
A few months back, I revisited Mortal Shell to refresh myself on the story and lore of the first game ahead of the upcoming sequel. In doing so, I realized that I didn't really have the full story. The Virtuous Cycle DLC added a surprising amount of lore and backstory which are critical in getting the full picture of Mortal Shell 1. Yet this content is absent from the story and lore videos you'll find when searching for Mortal Shell 1. And so, whether you're refreshing yourself on the story and lore or catching up for the sequel, please enjoy this video which covers the full story and lore of Mortal Shell 1, including the Virtuous Cycle DLC. I will preface this video by saying that even with some clarity from the DLC, there's still a fair number of gaps in the story and lore that need bridging. To that end, I've cited sources in the subtitles and made it clear in the video when I'm presenting a theory, with the ultimate goal of providing a cohesive narrative that adheres closely to the provided information. Let's get into the full story and lore of Mortal Shell. Mortal Shell starts with the Foundling awakening from his slumber in a realm called the Revered, but the story of Mortal Shell started long before in the fledgling kingdom of Fulgrim. By the time Foundling awakes, Fulgrim is a crumbling remnant, and it's at least due in part to the inciting event of Mortal Shell. Foundling's kin fell from the heavens in golden chariots trailed by fire and lightning. Whether these golden chariots were divine vehicles, spacefaring vessels, or meteors is unknown, but regardless, the landing left them in ruins. Within the smoldering ruin, a man named Hadern found the first seeds of infinity. Among these beings called the Unborn were those who would someday become the Revered, but at that time were simply seedlings.
I found the seedlings wriggling in the earth. In my palm, they writhed helplessly. Their hide mottled and dried like dead leaves before falling away. These creatures grew soft and flesh-like, wrinkled like my own hands. They blossomed into something strange yet familiar. Surely, such creatures have been sent to us for some greater purpose. Their secret bodies adapt to our world with startling speed. And somehow, I feel I have changed too. Yet, I see the terror in the eyes of my kin. They do not understand this blessed harmony. They only understand subjugation and slavery.
Hadern was amazed by how quickly they adapted. But it's not just the seedlings who changed. Hadern felt that somehow he had changed too. That a blessed harmony, a connection had formed between Hadern and the seedlings. Hadern took the seedlings with him, and some grew into larvae. Unsure what to do, Hattern put the larvae in cages, but they were quick to adapt, and this only made them grow hard and break out of their confines. From their nebulous forms, limbs, even faces emerged, their eyes pleading. Hattern knew that he couldn't contain or take care of these larvae by himself and sought help. Hattern took the first larva into a foundry where the Forge Master agreed to construct an iron maze around the foundry that would both contain the larva and keep out those who feared and sought to harm the unborn. I think it's important to note here now, with limited exceptions, the initial reaction to the unborn by others is one of terror and hate. Where Hattern saw harmony, he says that the others only understood subjugation and slavery. Humanity has a tendency to react to something new with fear, to kill or conquer something that we don't understand, and that's what I think happened with Hattern's kin. Hattern took another of the unborn larvae to an architect who, unlike the Forge Master, wasn't initially sympathetic to Hattern's cause, and Hattern forced him at knife point to touch the endless, formless mass of the larva. Hattern saw a vision of inscrutable geometry when he touched this larva and brought it to the architect, who upon touching the unborn fell to his knees transfixed, also seeing the inscrutable geometry that was to be built. This is the first time we witness Hattern receiving a vision, a direct communication from the larva, or something communicating through the larva, but this wasn't the only instance. We'll explicitly learn about another instance where Hattern is given instructions by an entity that is not the larva in a moment, but I want to highlight here that Hattern likely received other visions and communications that we aren't told about. Most of the information we've covered so far comes from monologues that are explicitly glimpses into Hattern's life and not the whole story. It may be that Hattern took the first larva to the Forge Master because he thought the Forge Master would be sympathetic, but it's also possible that he received a vision or instruction. Fate is a major theme in Mortal Shell, and as we'll learn over the course of this video, there is a guiding hand pulling the strings of mortals as necessary to see their plan come to fruition. We don't get a glimpse into Hattern's recounting of the third unborn larva, but we know that she was taken deep into icy caverns to slumber and remain protected. And finally, there was the fourth unborn larva. Hattern was instructed, likely through a dream or vision, by the goddess Vatra to take the fourth unborn to her servants at their temple. Vatra is named precisely once in the Molten Spike description, and yet as we'll see, she's clearly integral to the story of Mortal Shell. I won't dwell on this, but I put this as a criticism on the storytelling of Mortal Shell. It may be the result of late changes to the story, or it was simply left too vague, but I'd wager that most of you watching this video are more likely to know the name Vatra from the Mortal Shell 2 beta than from the first game. In fact, it was reading the name Vatra in the beta a few months back that sent me like Gandalf researching the One Ring to do a deep dive on the story of Mortal Shell. But let's get back to the fruit of that labor.
I found the priest in a squalid temple. I explained that her goddess had sent me. Of course, she was unimpressed until I led her to the exquisite, impossible creature. How could it be anything other than divine? She worshipped at its feet, and our bargain was struck. She would burrow into the bowels of earth and await deliverance.
Hattern, at the behest of Vatra, took the unborn to her servants where they began a process called the Stone Birth Ritual by having the larva burrow into the bowels of the earth and await deliverance. And then time passed. We don't know how much time, but enough to construct a non-Euclidean temple. I'm an architect, and the Euclidean buildings I design can take quite a while, so I can only imagine non-Euclidean structures take even longer to construct. But the inscrutable geometry was built and Hattern went to visit.
I had not anticipated the architect's success. Clamoring throngs demanded entry into this impossible temple. I pushed through them, finding him now clad in garish vestments. Crimson dribbled down his chin as he drank from an ornate chalice. I confronted him, but the mob would not allow me to lift a hand against the source of the nectar.
The people of Fulgrim once feared and hated the Unborn, but now throngs clamored to get into the impossible temple. What had changed? Hattern found that the architect now wore priestly vestments and was harvesting for himself and dispersing to the masses a substance called nectar that secreted from the Unborn. What was once a place created to protect the Unborn from the masses had become a temple for the same masses to worship the Unborn, and the sacred nectar was the catalyst for this change. This was the beginning of the practice of harvesting nectar from the Unborn, now called the Revered, a substance developer Cold Symmetry described as the root of all conflict in the world. Nectar is primarily known as the divine drink of the Greek and Roman gods, or a substance secreted by plants. Nectar in Mortal Shell acts as a fantastical mixture of the two. The etymology of nectar is a combination of Greek and Sanskrit that literally means overcoming death. In Greek and Roman mythology, the gods drink a divine substance called nectar, granting them immortality. Nectar is also the word used for a viscous, sugary liquid produced by plants. Nectar is secreted from glands called nectaries as a symbiotic survival mechanism that functions in a variety of ways, from attracting pollinators for fertilization to providing nutrients to insects to protect against herbivores. In Mortal Shell, the Unborn secrete nectar from their sacred gland. The worshippers of the Unborn, called by the devout the Revered, see them as divine beings whose sacred nectar opens a path towards transcendence and immortality. Devout see the nectar as a gift that brings them closer to the Revered. Imbibing nectar ranges in effects from giving visions, to healing, and even transforming those who drink it. As with any desired substance, hierarchies developed around the extraction of nectar. High-ranking devout receive purified nectar. The byproduct of this process is called tar, and it goes to lesser devout where it's processed again and again until what's left is nothing but greasy and contaminated remnants of nectar. Eventually, tar became the economy in Fulgrim, replacing coin as the currency. Humanity was profoundly affected by the advent of nectar in Fulgrim, but what did the Revered get out of it? They were worshipped, of course, seen as gods by the devout, but I don't think that's why they produced nectar in the first place. As we discussed, nectar is secreted by plants as a symbiotic survival mechanism, and that's what is happening with the Revered. When Hattern first held the seedlings, he was amazed by how they shed their hides and grew flesh in response to touching the skin of his hands, changing before his very eyes. They were adapting to their environment, learning from Hattern, but he also felt that they were affecting him in what he described as a blessed harmony. I think that the sacred glands of the Unborn are a key component of this connection, this symbiosis. They can naturally undergo extreme metamorphosis to adapt to their environment, but they're fragile when they're young. In return for protection and a source to learn and adapt from, the Unborn secrete nectar to share their powers of vision, transformation, and healing. But what if these seedlings, these Unborn, find themselves in the presence of those who know only fear, subjugation, and slavery? What if they learn from those who take their gifts and turn it into power to wield over others? Well, you get the Revered. 3 temples rose up around the Revered, with each of them developing a response to their environment. The foundry where the Forge Master crafted the Iron Maze became the Shrine of Ash. The Revered of the Shrine of Ash reflects the fires of the Forge, burning with desire and demanding sacrifices to feed his unending hunger. Few of the devout remember the true purpose of the artifacts of the foundry, as the smoke and smell of burnt flesh fills the air. The devout of the Shrine of Ash answer their immolating god's demands by flaying themselves and performing sacraments of ash to burn their flesh. They are ascetics that believe the flesh of their mortal bodies is frail, nothing but kindling for their spirit to burn through, and that immortality is achievable through embracing agony and sacrifice. The ultimate sacrament in the Shrine of Ash is immolation, throwing themselves upon the pyre to be one with the consecrated flame of their immolating god. The enshrined sanctum is an icy tomb housing a Revered known by the devout as the Immaculate. The Immaculate mirrors the winter glass of her sanctum as the most fragile of the Revered with her diminutive size. Her form remains frozen as she hibernates within the enshrined sanctum, the devout awaiting her birth. The Immaculate's faithful believe that the old world is preserved within the ice and that her birth will bring about an end to war and famine. The devout pledge themselves to the deathless doctrine, surrendering their will and subjugating themselves to the Immaculate. The martyrs of the enshrined are encased in winter glass to await the Immaculate's ascension as frozen relics, giving their living memory to the Revered. In this, they are preserved eternally, emptied of their will and memories. The inscrutable geometry of the temple became known as the Seat of Infinity. The infinite is an unknowable guiding force beyond space and time that is reflected in the non-Euclidean form of the temple. The Revered of this place is as inscrutable and mutable as the obsidian walls, sitting upon the Seat of Infinity at the apex of this sanctum. The devout don't believe that they can comprehend the Revered, that it is the mouth of the infinite. Adherents of this order reject their senses and the seduction of reason, seeking to understand the unknowable. Before the mouth of infinity is the shifting archives, a library that contains endless columns of stone tablets etched in a state of nectar-fueled delirium by the twice-born and faceless clerics, with letters spiraling out and interspersed with mathematical formulae. The confines of the flesh are a burden as the devout seek understanding, and they burn incense to unravel the connection between body and spirit. The disconnect from the limitations of the flesh and reality are further seen in the practices of the sisters and brothers, the ordained of the order. They give up their names and don masks, creating a kinship with the multitude. They undertake the rite of rebirth by draining their blood with a seal, giving them visions of the past and future, and are reborn upon the conclusion of the ritual. Ultimately, many among them sever themselves permanently from the confines of flesh and reality, by throwing themselves into the void of the sanctum to be reborn as a child of the myriad, a multitude of sisters and brothers connected to the infinite in a boundless form that transcends time. The ritual rebirths of the sisters and brothers also results in the birth of dark reflections that manifest in the Seat of Infinity, sublime versions of the brothers and sisters. Yeah, this place is pretty wild.
The divine is not ours to extract and consume. I tried to warn the others, but their bodies and minds had already been twisted by this blasphemous act. Even the Revered reflect their madness, their hate. They are all lost. They drink deeply and forget their names, their purpose, replacing their beliefs with falsehoods. There is only you, unborn. Prepare, for I shall test you.
The hope Hadron had once felt in the blessed harmony was now replaced with frustration and anger at this corrupted symbiosis that had formed between the Revered and the devout. And Hadron wasn't alone. Solomon was a scholar at the Seat of Infinity, a brother that had become disillusioned by the charlatans and sycophants that permeated the devout of Fulgrim. In his scholarship, Solomon had endeavored to turn tar into true nectar, and he succeeded. But his brother had greedily drunk deeply of this true nectar, and it had irrevocably transformed him. You would think that Solomon converting tar into true nectar would change the course of history in Fulgrim, but it's never spoken about again, and I think that's likely for two reasons. The secondary reason is that I don't think those in power would want to lose their control over the flow of true nectar, the basis for their power, but the primary reason is that I don't think Solomon shared this knowledge, horrified at what he saw happen to his brother. I think this event was a turning point for him in his relationship with the orders of the devout and the use of nectar, an inflection point where he began to look for another path.
It would be laughable if it were not so lamentable. These so-called seers wield icons and contraptions they do not understand. They uphold laws they ignore as needed. And yet, they unearthed a tablet like nothing I'd seen before. Is this what you found? The promise of the unknowable? It's gibberish. Familiar signs and symbols etched by a human hand in my own tongue. Yet they're arranged without any discernible logic. The letters spiral in concentric circles, interspersed with figures that resemble mathematical formulae. It means nothing, I'm certain, but I can't look away. How could this be a story of a man with my name? He bears the same scars, shares in the same desires, even finds the same tablet. Can it be called history if it's written by a being that sees the future as readily as the past?
Within the shifting archives, Solomon found a tablet that described his life and future. He saw his fate as something that was not his to deny, but to fulfill. Solomon left the seat of infinity and joined up with Hadern in his growing following. He had hoped that the revered and devout could be redeemed, that the blessed harmony Hadern once experienced could still be realized, and that hope would be kindled through someone who was about to be born. At the squalid temple of the servants of Vatra, it was time for deliverance. A knight by the name of Haros had been sent by his queen to Fulgrim as part of a company ordered to slay the revered, deemed false gods by his kingdom. Haros was arrogant and saw himself as superior to devout and brigands that inhabited Fulgrim. He bullied brigands into giving him directions to the temple of the revered. Haros' arrogance cost him. The brigands trailed them, waiting for an opportunity. They fell upon Haros with crude knives, injuring Haros badly. Haros escaped the brigands, fleeing into a cave. Haros met a priest clutching a tablet who said that he couldn't help with his injuries, but promised that he would be reborn in the shadow of the revered. Haros dismissed this as the ravings of a madman until the priest called him by name, at which point Haros took him for a spy and cut him down. And here I'd like to quickly make a side note. Some people, myself included, thought that the priest Haros cut down was Solomon, who was foretold of his death by an assailant. However, as we will see shortly, Solomon is alive after the death of the priest, confirming for me that the priest wasn't Solomon, but instead probably a priest of Vatra. With that aside, it's time for a very important birth in this story, or should I say a pair of important births. Haros entered the squalid temple to find the revered giving birth. This is the culmination of the stone birth ritual that Vatra instructed Hadern to bring the unborn larva to her servants for. Haros was in awe of the scene before him.
First I heard the squeals, as if from 100 mouths. Then I saw her, the revered, a writhing mass of sinew, as if all at once she was splitting apart and coalescing. Is it salvation to look upon her? Deliverance? I knelt, losing my strength. I wanted to look away, and yet she was all I wanted to see. I watched as something swam beneath her belly. Her flesh sloughed from the bone and poured forth like mud, drowning the worshippers in a slurry of blood and earth. Birth and death were indistinguishable. I should leave, find safety. But I dragged myself closer as the prayers of the devout filled my ears. I couldn't lift my sword. I couldn't kill mother and child. We had vowed to slay this false god. Yet this promise was no more than a coerced pledge. What difference does it make which master we serve? We will serve all the same.
Haros can't bring himself to harm the mother or her children, and he renounces the pledge he'd made to his queen and aids in the stone birth ritual. Haros helps birth the twin offspring using the molten spike of the hallowed sword, an implement specifically designed for stone birth rituals. And because the Molten Spike is a load-bearing item, I want to read the description of the Molten Spike and camp out on it for a moment. The Molten Spike description says, in an age long past, the servants of Vatra used these spikes in stone birth rituals. The goddess's ill-bred offspring could not hatch without their aid. For 2 sentences, it packs a lot of information in there. It's implied that the stone birth ritual predates the birth of the twins and has been performed multiple times. However, I do want to clarify that I believe this is the first time this ritual has been performed on an unborn. It's stated in the DLC that the unborn fell from the heavens in golden chariots trailed by fire and lightning, and in their smoldering ruin, Hattern found the first seeds of infinity. There's no evidence of unborn on this planet prior to the arrival of the seeds of infinity that Hattern found, just that stone birth rituals were performed prior to their arrival by the servants of Vatra. The other big piece of information in this description is that those born from the stone birth ritual are referred to as the goddess's ill-bred offspring. It might be obvious, but I want to emphasize that in the stone birth ritual, Vatra impregnates the mother. It's clear that these twins are unique amongst the unborn because they were conceived by Vatra, and they're the only offspring from the Seeds of Infinity. I do believe that Vatra sent the Seeds of Infinity to this world, and there is a connection or kinship between the seeds and the goddess that I'll discuss more later, but that even amongst their kin, the twin unborn are special. With that point thoroughly hammered, let's return to the stone birth of Foundling and his twin sister. Stone birth is violent, requiring the molten spike to birth the offspring, and this process killed the Revered and injured the twin newborn. Haros, now serving Vatra, delivers the offspring to Hattern in accordance with the bargain he struck with the priestess when he delivered the unborn to her. I believe that after delivering the twins to Hattern, Haros stumbles back toward the squalid temple, ultimately succumbing to his wounds from the brigands in the shadow of the Revered, just as was foretold by the priest. And that is the birth of the Foundling and his twin sister, although the Foundling would not awaken in the physical world for some time. The Foundling slept, and his twin sister was badly damaged by the birth, being blinded and broken by the experience. Hattern couldn't help twin sister, but Solomon could. Solomon ordered the creation of Fulgrim Tower to keep the unborn safe, and there he nursed twin sister back to health as Foundling slumbered. Twin sister's inheritance from the stone birth ritual is that she can inhabit and move through rock. After being broken by the birth, she inhabited stone to provide more raw material for her physical form. However, twin sister can't control hardening into stone like we see with the Foundling. Without Solomon's care, she would have petrified entirely, but he crafted a mask for her that would halt this process. Solomon was disillusioned by the practices of the devout, but he saw potential in twin sister. Solomon saw the potential for humanity and the unborn to lift each other up through a process he called kindred evolution, developing further the blessed harmony that Hattern once felt. Solomon believed that this symbiotic relationship could transform humanity and ascend the unborn. He even hoped that this could redeem the destructive cycle occurring in Fulgrim and the revered sanctums. But as Solomon's hope grew, Hattern's resolve waned.
I first glimpsed him in a nightmare. Beneath our feet, a dark shape swam. Yet we did not sink. Our swords crossed, but I had a sense that this had all happened before, and would happen again. When I awoke, the scaled seedling had vanished, only to return in my dreams.
While he slept, Hattern was transported into the Reverie, a spiritual realm beyond the physical world, where he encountered the slumbering Foundling. During the game, we play out some of these sparring matches between Hattern and the Foundling within the Reverie, as Hattern tests Foundling in combat. In the waking world, Hattern prayed over Foundling as he slumbered endlessly. Though the Foundling slumbered, he was being affected by Hattern. First described as a scaled seedling, Foundling's form became more human-like and mirrored Hattern's. I believe that as Hattern despaired at the situation in Fulgrim, he saw violence against the revered and devout as the only path forward. And so through their shared dreams in the Reverie, Hattern trained Foundling to fight, but Hattern reached a breaking point.
I saw him again. The dreamer. He found me in the murky shallows. But this time, it was different. He tore open my skin, wore my flesh like a suit of mail. When I awoke, he slept, as he always did, beneath his sister. But I could feel something inside me changed. I can't explain it, but I must leave.
I think that on a very understandable level, he was terrified of the Foundling wearing him like a suit of armor, but that on another level this was also the ultimate corruption of the unborn in his eyes. Hattern had witnessed how the Revered reflected the fear, madness, and hate of the devout as a result of their connection, and now he was creating an unborn warrior in his image. So Hattern took the remaining seedlings and fled into the Reverie. Things fell apart at this point, with many of Hattern's followers leaving the tower in his absence, leaving Solomon devastated and alone with the twins. But Solomon didn't lose hope and continued his work. And one night he had an epiphany. He realized that he could use the seedlings Hattern had absconded with to restore twin sister. All he had to do was recover the seedlings. Now, we don't know the exact extent to which Solomon knew the details of his future, just that the tablet from the shifting archives had details of his life and his fate that was written into the stone. With that caveat, I think Solomon knew that he would never get the chance to recover the seedlings, at least not in this life, because he'd seen his life written before him and knew what would and would not happen during his time. He believed that fate was not his to defy, but to fulfill. Where Hattern feared his connection with the Foundling, Solomon saw purpose in his death and that Foundling would need his mortal shell. Because Solomon knew of his impending death, he put his hope in Twin Sister and the Foundling that they could finish the work he started and realize Twin Sister's ascension. Solomon, abandoned by Hattern, his work with Twin Sister unfinished, did not bemoan the unchanging course of fate as he left Fulgrim Tower, knowing he would not return.
I know you are awaiting, my assailant. I have read how you will descend upon me. I will be too slow to stop you, though I will try. Just know that I do not blame you. I cannot hold on to this body when another will need it far more. We are a single existence, split only by the tides of time, joined together in death.
While Solomon's story comes to a close here, his legacy was far from over. At some point, Solomon brought his brother to the tower, the heretic who drank too deeply of true nectar and was transformed. The promise of revelation carried a high price for those who glimpsed the unknowable. They became forsaken creatures fit only to be locked away. Solomon had subdued him with the tarnished seal, a symbol of infinity used in rituals of rebirth and transfiguration. Like he did with Twin Sister, he fashioned his brother a mask. Whether he was similarly petrifying or accursed with some other malady is unknown, but it was to spare his brother from a fate worse than death. So what exactly happened to Solomon's brother, who would become known as the Old Prisoner and the Dark Father? When he drank the true nectar, he saw a vision.
I witnessed the world burst from the fires of heaven. I watched as it decayed into this wretched place.
Solomon stared at the Old Prisoner with revulsion because he transformed into the form we see, which I believe to be an incomplete transfiguration. The act of transfiguration is transforming outwardly to a more exalted physical appearance. In Mortal Shell, the rite of transfiguration is specifically forbidden because it turns those who attempted it into forsaken creatures fit only to be locked away. That describes the Old Prisoner pretty well, and I wouldn't be surprised if the rite of transfiguration was forbidden because of what the Old Prisoner did. The Old Prisoner drank deeply of the true nectar Solomon created, began to transfigure as he ascended, but it was incomplete and Solomon's brother found himself disfigured instead of transfigured, descending into madness instead of ascending to godhood. But the old prisoner wasn't done. In his vision, he saw himself ascending. All he needed was more true nectar, and he saw how to do it. And so, with Hattern gone and Solomon dead, the old prisoner sits contentedly atop his perch, awaiting the newest. The unborn must be greeted with gifts, but gifts they will bestow, in return for unwavering loyalty. An unknown amount of time after these events, the Foundling awakens and mortal shell begins. He awakes in the reverie, and before he'd even had his coffee, arms himself with the hallowed sword that birthed him. It's hard to say if Hattern's mind had changed since fleeing, or if it was the complicated nature of time and the reverie at play, but Hattern spars with the Foundling testing him. Foundling is then transported to the physical world in the mouth of a wormfish, a creature of the reverie that acts as a ferryman between realms. Foundling awakens at the place of his birth in the squalid temple of Vatra, within the corpse of his mother, and is birthed awake into the physical world. Just beyond this temple, Foundling discovers the corpse of Haros the vassal in the shadow of the deceased Revered, his mortal shell awaiting its fate as a vessel for the Foundling. Before continuing the story, I want to take a moment to discuss Foundling's ability to inhabit the mortal shells. The Foundling's nascent form is fragile when not covered in stone, and so the shells provide protection. Foundling inhabits Haros with relative ease, telling us something he can naturally do, something he learned while slumbering in the reverie, or perhaps even a combination of the two. I think that at least part of the reason Foundling can do this is because he's the most human-like of the unborn. And we're told explicitly by Twin Sister that Foundling has more control over his ability to harden his physical body than she does. I believe that inhabiting shells sprouts from his unborn ability to change form, combined with his especially human-like form, resulting from his connection with Hattern. But it's not just about wearing their skin for protection. Through deepening his connection with the mortal shells, Foundling gets glimpses into their lives and learns what it means to be human. And he does this with the help of someone who we're about to meet. Making his way through the squalid temple, Foundling arrives at Fulgrim Tower. Awaiting him is Sister Ganessa, and it is she who names him Foundling. Ganessa was once a Sister of the Seat of Infinity. She was meant to be a child of the Myriad, part of the collective multitude of brothers and sisters, but it seems that Sister Ganessa separated herself, leaving one foot in the physical realm and one in the spiritual realm of the infinite. There's a bit more to this that I'll discuss later, but the result was that Sister Ganessa became functionally immortal. However, because her physical form was shattered in the ritual, she is cursed to observe eternally as a phantom who lives between worlds. And so she helps Foundling deepen his connection with the shells, though she herself is unable to inhabit a vessel. Upon dying in the game, Foundling returns to Sister Ganessa. The first time this happens, she tells Foundling that his spirit is bound here, unwilling to go on. Perhaps it has an obligation left to fulfill. This is a narrative explanation for dying in the game, but I wanted to highlight it because it's also mentioned by Twin Sister how they're hard to kill and are able to persist beyond death to fulfill their purpose. Now let's check in with the other residents at Fulgrim Tower. There's another newcomer to the tower, the merchant Vlas. Vlas mostly serves to fulfill the gameplay function of a vendor, but he's a dapper fellow with a cat who serves tea and sells his wares for tar. The next resident of Fulgrim Tower is Twin Sister, and Foundling must enter the reverie to speak with her. Twin Sister is happy to see Foundling finally awake. She can't move due to her form, but through her connection with Foundling, she can see through his eyes in the reverie. She wants Foundling to help continue Solomon's work by retrieving the lost seedlings that Hattern took when he fled. This is the narrative framework around the roguelite mode of the Virtuous Cycle DLC. We'll discuss where Twin Sister's story goes when we talk about the endgame, but I want to note that much of what we've learned about Hattern and Solomon's partnership, as well as the twins' origin, has come from Twin Sister speaking to Foundling as he makes runs in the Virtuous Cycle and progresses the roguelite mode. The final resident of Fulgrim Tower is the Old Prisoner. Foundling yoinks out the tarnished seal, and the Old Prisoner thanks him for showing kindness, offering the seal to him as thanks. And then the Dark Father begins his con. He asks Foundling to bring him the sacred glands of the Revered so that he can extract enough true nectar to heal himself. He throws out a little bait, coyly suggesting that if Foundling does this, he too may be able to free himself from this wretched land. While Foundling doesn't technically agree to anything, to progress the story we need to go kill the Revered and extract their glands. So why does Foundling agree to do this? The Old Prisoner will later call Foundling naive for giving him aid, and maybe the naivete of being an impressionable, freshly awoken unborn is a factor, but I think that Foundling murders the Revered for Old Prisoner so readily because on some level he's not doing it for the Old Prisoner, but Hattern. Hattern didn't share Solomon's hope in Twin Sister's ascension. He trained Foundling to fight within the Reverie because he saw eliminating the Revered as the only path forward, and the Unborn as the one to do it. Twin Sister tells Foundling that she believes part of Hattern is within him, and I think that Foundling heads out from Fulgrim Tower in part to complete Hattern's work and slay the Revered. The Revered temples can be visited in any order, but the Shrine of Ash makes sense as the first area to visit from a gameplay and narrative standpoint. And wrapped up in the story of the Shrine of Ash is Teal the Acolyte.
2 winters. That is all the physician promised was left for me. The malady gnaws at the corners of my eyes, pries the flesh from fingers and toes. It burrows deeper and deeper into my bones with each passing day. Even my own kin look away.
Spurned by his own kin and afflicted by a terminal illness, Teal donned a cowl to hide his visage and left for the Seat of Infinity. There he met a kind soul who didn't withdraw at his disfigurement, but instead offered comfort and nourishment. This kind soul was Sester Ganessa. The pair fell in love and left the Seat of Infinity, wandering out into the wilds of Fulgrim. They fell in with brigands where they forgot their teachings, drank heartily, and rutted like joyous animals. Teal and Ganessa stole tar from brigands, justifying it by telling themselves that brigands didn't understand its full potential. In his tar-addled state, Teal had a vision of Ganessa.
With the tar throbbing in my belly, I see her completely. Each movement creates a swarm of copies. They ripple out from her, following their own whims. Some collide and join together, while others split apart, forming new copies. A reflection of reflections spreading out from her. The nexus, yet also indistinguishable.
This vision ended up being foresight. Teal and Ganessa were punished for stealing the tar. It's unclear exactly what happened, but it seems likely that Ganessa was brought back to the Cesters at the Seat of Infinity, and Teal was sent away. I think that either as a result of being separated from Teal, or as a punishment by the clerics of the Seat of Infinity, Ganessa cast herself into the void to be reborn as a child of the Myriad. Ganessa was heartbroken, and I think that heartbreak is what caused her to be reborn with one foot in the physical and another in the spiritual, making her the ethereal Sester Ganessa that we see in the game. As for Teal, as his affliction worsened, the skin of his face peeled away and he wandered the wilds as an outcast. He met a merchant who mentioned a colony where his misfortune could be cured, and so Teal arrived at the Shrine of Ash. The Shrine of Ash views the physical body as kindling for the spirit, welcoming the afflicted to purify themselves through cleansing flame. Teal witnessed a pupil flay himself and sacrifice his flesh as an offering to the flames, moaning in anguish and pleasure intermingled. Teal saw this sacrifice as both madness and beautiful, taken by how the Revered could inspire such willing suffering. So Teal joined the Shrine of Ash as a pupil, a place where the afflicted are welcomed and the suffering of the body was seen as purification of the spirit. Eventually, Teal took the sacrament of ashes.
The oblate dipped a hand into the embers, and the flames leapt at his touch. Drawing back his blackened fingers, he drew a sigil of ash beneath my eyes. The soot burned against my cheeks, growing hotter with each word of purification. As smoke choked my vision, and tears welled in my eyes, the world itself burned white hot. But beneath it all, there was nothing. No monsters, no gods, only oblivion. The consecrated fires revealed cinders and shadows, yet I strained to see more. Surely these sages offered more than the assurances of annihilation.
Teal rejected this glimpse of annihilation, the nothingness that he saw beyond during the sacrament. He couldn't accept oblivion because he never lost hope. Ganessa similarly couldn't accept oblivion because a part of her still yearned deeply for the physical world, and I think it was because of her connection with Teal. Teal left the Shrine of Ashes and ventured back out into the wilds. As an incorporeal phantom, Ganessa called out to Teal, urging him to return to the shrine, but Teal would never make it, finally succumbing to his affliction in a quiet grove. We don't know if Ganessa wanted him to return to the shrine out of desire for Teal to have companionship, or to go to a place with nectar to heal and for comfort, but we know it was because she cared about him. If Foundling visits Ganessa inhabiting Teal, she has unique dialogue.
You wear a familiar face, or should I say, a distinct lack thereof. Where did you find him, Foundling? Do not answer. Just come closer. It's a simple pleasure to glimpse my beloved. Even if he's truly gone, some part of him remains with you. A small consolation, but I shall accept this mercy.
Back at the Shrine of Ash, Foundling acquires a new weapon, the Smoldering Mace. He does so by reading the Book of Hattern, which transports him bodily into the Reverie. There, Hattern tests Foundling by using the weapon against him. If he is successful, Hattern rewards him with the Smoldering Mace. With a new weapon in hand, Foundling makes his way through the iron maze of the temple grounds. The devout of the Shrine of Ash aren't much more than scraped bone and tattered sinew packed with ashes. Some barely have a physical form anymore as they become ash incarnate, and some burn away their physical form in urns of fire. Foundling cuts through these devout wielding their own weapon of righteous judgment and fights his way into the Sanctum of Flame. The Revered hangs seething as those below bow low in supplication, the consecrated living flame always becoming, always feeding, as its form flakes away in torrents of ash. Before Foundling can extract the Revered sacred gland, he must first face the guardian of the sanctum. Drinking the nectar of the sanctum, Foundling is drawn into a realm where he meets Imrod the Unrepentant. Imrod was once one of the smiths of the foundry. He was the last of his kin, a people who'd been ravaged by sickness, and he was no exception. Stricken with both grief and illness, Imrod dragged himself before the immolation and let himself be consumed by the consecrated flame of the Revered. His spirit reformed in this place of ash and fire. He appears to be turning corpses to ash, and I'd speculate that he's part of the system of annihilation that feeds the Revered. Imrod the Unrepentant falls and drops the glimpse of annihilation. Imrod saw his kin fall to disease until only he was left, and then he himself saw annihilation. The Foundling is sent back to the physical world where the Revered is now left vulnerable. Foundling claims the first of the sacred glands, the inflamed gland. The inflamed gland is described as radiating heat and causing the bearer's head to ache with a feverish intensity while it's held. The Revered of the Shrine of Ash produced scorching nectar that made the heads of the devout ache with fever and their spirits ache with feverish intensity, urging them to sacrifice their bodies as kindling to his all-consuming flame. The Shrine of Ash is permanently darkened by this event, the layout of the temple altered as the place begins to crumble, and formidable foes crowd the corridors of the Iron Maze. Mechanically, this is to ramp up tension and challenge as players run the gland back to the old prisoner, but narratively this shows the hold on reality the Revered had within his sanctum and in the Fulgrim beyond, as his death literally changes the world around him. Upon leaving the temple, Fulgrim is covered in a mist, Even outside of the Shrine of Ash, the Revered's death affects the fabric of the world. Noxurpers, enemies typically found in limited numbers around Fulgrim, come out in force during the mists. Their name roughly translates to Night Creeper, and they're essentially emotional vampires. They hunt prey not for their flesh, but for their glimpses. Glimpses in the world of Mortal Shell are memories and emotions made manifest, and possessing one lets the bearer feel the emotion and relive the memory from the person it came from. As for what the Noxurpers are, an etching found near Fulgrim Tower gives some insight. These creatures, twisted and malformed, they're almost unrecognizable. Whatever gifts Hattern had lavished them with were wasted. They've strayed so far from the path they're lost in a wilderness of their own making. Many of Hattern's followers fled when he abandoned Fulgrim Tower, and the implication of this etching is that many of those who fled became Noxurpers. These creatures have lost their humanity, hunting to feel even a glimpse of what they lost, and they stalk Foundling relentlessly as he makes his way back to Fulgrim Tower. Upon arriving, Foundling meets a newcomer, Thestis. Thestis is a connoisseur of glimpses and can call and dismiss the fog at the cost of a glimpse. That sounds like a pretty powerful ability, but it's never really expanded upon, and Thestis' role in Mortal Shell is primarily mechanical. We'll get more about him later, but now it's time to deliver the Sacred Gland to Big Bird. Ganessa tells us that the rite of extraction requires deeply pious hands, though perhaps deeply blasphemous hands would do. That each drop of true nectar contains transcendence and transfigurement. Upon delivering the inflamed gland to the Dark Father, he extracts the true nectar with a little fanfare, and as thanks, strengthens the Foundling's tarnished seal. I think the Dark Father is doing this to aid the Foundling in completing his task, but the tarnished seal is also described as being used in rites of rebirth and transfiguration, and is likely part of the true nectar extraction process. After this, he asks Foundling to endure another temple and bring him the next sacred gland, and so it's time to visit the enshrined sanctum. On the way to the enshrined sanctum, Foundling comes across Gorf. His name is Frog spelled backwards, and that makes sense because he's a giant frog. Gorf and Foundling bond over their mutual enjoyment of music, and feeding Gorf and playing the lute will earn the player new shades for the shells. It's becoming a trend to say this, but Gorf's function is primarily mechanical. Now let's discuss the story of the enshrined sanctum and the Mortal Shell intimately intertwined with this place. Eredrim was a warrior from a foreign kingdom filled with regret. His order had slaughtered hundreds of ill-trained and ill-equipped adversaries over petty border disputes. He was given titles and praise for his deeds, but what Eredrim wanted was absolution. He was haunted by his actions, and when he heard that he might find redemption through the Immaculate Path, he traveled to the enshrined sanctum in Fulgrim. The deathless doctrine of the Immaculate promised an end to war and suffering, and desperate to hear this, Eredrim signed his name into the doctrine. He wanted to be free of his guilt and shame, and he found that in devotion to the Immaculate. As discussed previously, the devout of the enshrined sanctum subjugate themselves voluntarily to the Immaculate, offering up their very will and memories to her. Eredrim finds peace in this servitude for a time. He became frustrated that he wasn't yet worthy of the sacred rites, unable to partake of the venerated nectar, but he was determined to prove himself. When Eredrim cut down children and the entrained for the magistrate, his guilt and trauma stemmed from the meaninglessness of these petty border conflicts. The shallow accolades and titles were given to placate him and legitimize his slaughter of innocents, but they did nothing for him. But for a righteous cause, for the Immaculate, his slaughter of the infirm and the weak would be to help end all wars and human suffering, to aid in the eventual birth of his god. To prove himself worthy, Eredrim did what he knew best: he killed.
The impoverished souls waited for judgment. Their heads were bowed, lips moving as they recited the martyr's hymn. My blade fell upon the first neck, but bone and sinew held fast. By the second blow, the remaining devout fled into the dark.
Airdrim cut down devout of the enshrined sanctum he deemed unworthy as they prayed, and there's evidence to suggest Airdrim's crusade extended beyond the walls of the enshrined sanctum and spilled out into the Seat of Infinity. When Brother Corvid in the Seat of Infinity sees the Foundling as Airdrim, he mistakes him for Airdrim himself, asking if he's returned to kill Brother Corvid as he once killed his fellow brothers. Airdrim is a brutal example of the sway the Revered have over the devout. The Immaculate took a man broken by war and violence, who sought the Immaculate to find absolution, and drove him to commit further atrocities. Airdrim didn't resist when he was seized by the Wardens of the Sanctum and brought before the Immaculate for judgment. The Ovate proclaimed that Airdrim was unfit and impure, but he didn't listen to the verdict.
Beneath the shadow of the Immaculate, I felt no pain. I swelled with pride as my eyes beheld her inscrutable form. She was the last remnant of an unquestionable grace, lost eons ago.
Beheading by the martyr's blade was the standard execution at the enshrined sanctum, but Airdrim received one reserved for particularly wicked heretics. He was poisoned and encased in a prison of winterglass meant to prolong his death.
My vision blurred and went opaque. The whiteness consumed the world, leaving only a vague memory. I felt hands guide me, ushering me away. Something sharp slipped beneath the plates of my armor. I swung out wildly, but my limbs grew heavy as cold crept in. I stumbled and fell, claws searching for the seams between steel and flesh.
And so Airdrim died, his body awaiting its purpose as a mortal shell for the Foundling. A curiosity about his shell is that it's found near the Seat of Infinity, which doesn't match up with his story of being poisoned and encased in ice within the enshrined sanctum. I think this is likely a gameplay consideration to spread the shells around the world, but if I were to speculate, I'd suggest that we find Airdrim near the Seat of Infinity because his corpse was removed from the sanctum of the Immaculate and placed to show the devout of the seat that they had taken care of the man who'd attacked their temple as a mea culpa. Speaking of attacking temples, it's time for the Foundling to visit the enshrined sanctum. The first section is referred to as the Abandoned Chamber. It's a tomb for the damned, their bodies offered to grave robbers and scavengers. This was done by the devout to discourage the outside world from venturing into the tomb, with a much larger obstacle standing sentinel at the end of this tomb. The Foundling is tested by Hattern once again, and is rewarded with the Martyr's Blade, a weapon used by the Sanctum for executions. After making his way through the Noxurpers and enslaved that roam the Abandoned Chamber, the Foundling confronts the enslaved Grisha. This Grisha was enslaved and brought down here to serve as a guardian to keep outsiders out of the enshrined sanctum, so that the enshrined could worship unfettered. Unfortunately for them, Foundling overcomes the enslaved Grisha, giving access to their enshrined sanctum. Foundling fights through the devout of the sanctum, who have titles like Slave of Scorn and Enslaved Disciple, further driving home how this sanctum's philosophy is rooted in subjugation to the Immaculate. At the end of the sanctum is the Martyr's Altar, where the enshrined encased in ice watch the Immaculate awaiting her ascension. The Immaculate slumbers high above, and again the Foundling must face a champion before gaining access to the Revered. Tarsus was the first martyr of the Immaculate, giving up his living memory to protect her, leaving himself an empty vessel of pure instinct and rage. Twin Sister remarks that Tarsus has died many times and will die many more. Like Foundling, he's a being that can persist beyond death, but unlike Foundling, he's an emptied husk. Tarsus has ascended to some level of immortality, but where Sester Ganessa straddles between worlds as a phantom without form, Tarsus seems to straddle the physical and the spiritual in form alone, his spirit subsumed by the Immaculate. He drops the glimpse of insignificance upon defeat, reflecting the first martyr's final thoughts as his memories and his will, his full self, was consumed. With Tarsus, the first martyr, put to bed, the Immaculate is left vulnerable and Foundling acquires the crystalline gland. This gland is translucent and filled with a bright, cold light that leads one towards rapturous reminiscence. The Immaculate produced nectar that made the devout yearn for a time that only exists in their memories, and then urged them to sacrifice their memories to her. The enshrined sanctum is also darkened at the loss of the Immaculate, and Fulgrim obscured by a thick mist. The old prisoner, upon taking the crystalline gland, urges Foundling to go on to the remaining temple and retrieve the final sacred gland. On the way to the Seat of Infinity, Foundling meets a character by the name of Baghead. Baghead isn't primarily mechanical, making him one of the few side characters who isn't. If Foundling gives Baghead roasted rat and superior moonshine, Baghead will offer to let Foundling join him, arguing that they should enjoy their short lives with food and music instead of trying so hard, and that ultimately it doesn't really matter. If Foundling accepts, a non-standard ending cutscene plays, in which Foundling plays music by the bonfire with Baghead as the mist creeps in and Noxurpers overrun Fulgrim. I'm not the first lore dude on YouTube to wax poetic about this joke ending, but I think what makes it compelling beyond the bit is how it interacts with the theme of fate that pervades Mortal Shell. The Baghead ending is nihilistic and suggests that Solomon's assertion of fate being written in stone is not entirely true, at least regarding Foundling. Because it's possible to play the game and never find a Solomon's shell, or simply choose not to inhabit it, get the Baghead ending, and then put down the game with the semiotics of rolling credits indicating a complete version of the story. Solomon's own fate written in stone was not entirely accurate, and it's because of Foundling's actions as determined by the player. Now obviously I'm getting pedantic about it, but for as bleak as Mortal Shell's story can be, the Baghead ending actually provides a ray of hope. It is nihilistic in its assertion that nothing truly matters, but by creating a choice it creates an absurdist reading of Mortal Shell where Foundling's actions aren't on rails, that he has a choice. And although the choice may ultimately be meaningless, it's up to Foundling, by extension the player, to create and give it meaning. And that brings us to this video's sponsor. Anyways, Foundling makes his way to the Seat of Infinity, but before entering the temple proper, Foundling meets a character tucked away amongst the obsidian pillars called the Corrupted Sister. She's not very talkative, functioning as a merchant, but she does have one particularly interesting item, the Forbidden Offering. The Forbidden Offering is described as a perverse offering for the tarnished seals that was used in the Forbidden Rite of Transfiguration that I mentioned earlier regarding the old prisoner. Corrupted Sister may have partaken in this rite. She is corrupted, another suggestion that the Rite of Transfiguration leads to undesired outcome, hence why it was forbidden. And where we find her suggests that she's been excommunicated by the temple, perhaps for practicing a forbidden rite. And so she hides amongst the obsidian columns on the exterior of the seat for safety against the brigands and Noxurpers that inhabit the wilds of Fulgrim. Now it's time for Foundling to enter the eternal narthex of the Seat of Infinity. Here Sister Ganessa warns of the clergy of the seat as well as their twins, dark reflections that manifest during the rebirth of the Sisters and Brothers. Foundling spars with Hattern to get the hammer and chisel, the implements used to etch the tablets found in the shifting archives. The scale of the Seat of Infinity is beyond anything we've seen at the other two temples, a massive field of obsidian slabs, arches, and columns. This place beyond the narthex is referred to as a ponderous synod, and is an ever-changing liminal space whose obsidian forms crumble and rebuild. A synod is a term used for an ecclesiastical governing body, such as the Assembly of Bishops in the Roman Catholic Church. Within the context of the world of Mortal Shell, I think this place is referred to as a synod because the Seat of Infinity also sees itself as the seat of power within Fulgrim. Sisters and Brothers patrolled this place outside alongside their dark counterparts, the Sublime Brothers and Sisters. They were all subordinates to the Faceless Clerics, who once inscribed the tablets of the shifting archives. After cutting his way through the Sisters and Brothers of the Synod, Foundling passes through the dim gate. Reality itself unravels as Foundling ascends the tower to the archives. There's a large statue at the base of the tower that I believe is depicting the architect who built the Seat of Infinity, and the inscrutable geometry he saw is really starting to come into play now. The Seat of Infinity straddles the physical world and the Reverie, and we'll see further evidence of that shortly. At the zenith of the tower just before the shifting archives, Foundling meets Brother Corvid. Brother Corvid stands upon the precipice of oblivion, afraid to cast himself into the void like his brothers did before him. But he's also weighed down by the mutability and futility of existence. Depending which shell you're inhabiting, he has something different to say. He sees Teal as the specter of death and a figment of his tortured imagination. He recognizes Solomon as a fellow brother and scholar, but asks him to try and not talk him off of this ledge. Airdrim he recognizes as the man who murdered his fellow brothers, and asks if he's come to do him the same favor, which you can oblige. If you visit Brother Corvid as Foundling, he recognizes you as an unborn and refers to you as the aberration. He says that his brothers despise Foundling and hate him for the sins of his fathers. The fathers he refers to in this case are Hattern, the old prisoner, and maybe Solomon as well. Hattern is called the progenitor, the old prisoner is called the Dark Father, and the three of them are all considered heretics by the devout. Foundling's association with the residents of Fulgrim Tower and human-like appearance are enough to label him as an aberration amongst the unborn, who the devout otherwise revere, and I'd say they're justified in their hate at this point considering he's going around murdering the revered for their sacred glands. If Foundling speaks to Brother Corvid as Haros, Corvid recognizes and calls him by name, saying that he feared Haros was dead. We later learn that Corvid was once a hunter, and my supposition is that perhaps Corvid was among the crew that came with Haros to slay the revered, and, like Haros, Corvid was converted in Fulgrim and became a devout of the Seat of Infinity. Corvid asks Haros to seek out his brother, Thestis, and give him his glimpse of admiration. Note that this is not his brother in the seat, but his sibling. Giving Thestis the glimpse, he is delighted, remarking that Corvid was a melancholy child. He gives Foundling a glimpse of tenacity, suggesting that this would help him remember when he was a hunter to raise Corvid's resolve. And Thestis was right. Returning to Corvid and giving him the glimpse of tenacity raises his spirits. Corvid feared his brother was dead, and knowing he's alive stirs him from his melancholy, and he decides to seek out Thestis. Unfortunately, if Brother Corvid does go seek out Thestis, he's killed by a Grisha along the way, which is a real bummer of an ending. Perhaps Airdrim ends up being the greatest kindness to poor Brother Corvid. On a more uplifting note, Foundling has finally reached the shifting archives. Here he meets Large Ganessa, who comments on the devout's endless search for revelations that ultimately led to madness. The library now lies in ruins, and the tablets collect dust. The insight that the faceless clerics once used to inscribe these tablets disappeared, leaving the Seat of Infinity to languish. At the end of the archives is the Revered, the Mouth of Infinity. Like the other Revered, we must first fight their guardian. Foundling goes up to the chalice to drink the Revered's nectar to be transported into the Reverie to face the guardian, but notably here Foundling instead falls through the floor. The shifting archives is already within the Reverie, and facing the guardian only requires Foundling to drop down to meet him. And that is Crucix the Twiceborn. Like Foundling and his sister, Crucix suffered from an unspecified physical deformity, and it wasn't the conjoined twin thing, that comes later. Desperate and dying, he prayed at the Mouth of Infinity and was reborn not once, but twice, with both fates entwined in his flesh. Now it could be that he undertook the rite of rebirth twice, but the way Twin Sister describes it as being reborn not once but twice with both fates intertwined, feels like it's something that happened during a singular rite of rebirth. Crucix was a scholar who etched many tablets within the shifting archives. He had many disciples, including Solomon. Twin Sister says that Solomon told her he was also twice born like Crucix and had taken the rite of rebirth, but that she doesn't believe it because he's not a madman or a monster. But we have no reason not to believe Solomon, as we already knew that he'd likely performed the rite of rebirth. From the accretion of resolve, Solomon says that he followed a path once tread by those who would become sisters and brothers, and Brother Corvid refers to him as brother. However, I don't understand the significance and implication of Solomon being twice-born. Perhaps it's just to show that Twin Sister has a blind spot for Solomon's obsessive scholarship, and cast some shade on the idea that all who perform the rite of rebirth become monsters, but I feel like it's more than that. And I don't think it's implying that Solomon has a secret buddy hiding under his armor. This one honestly stumped me, so let me know in the comments what you think. Foundling fights and defeats Crucix the Twiceborn, receiving the glimpse of oblivion. Crucix sought to be freed of the confines of his malformed body and reborn. He sought out revelations and understanding. What he ultimately found was the unknowable and embraced oblivion. Returning up top, Foundling comes face to face with the Mouth of Infinity and rips out the knotted gland. This sacred gland is a cancerous mass of gnarled tissue that pulses with an irregular cadence, and the longer it's held, the clearer it becomes to the bearer that a multitude is contained within their own flesh. The Mouth of Infinity's nectar urged its devout to not trust the confines of the physical realm, including their own form, and to embrace oblivion and join the multitude. Even within the reverie, the world darkens at the demise of the Revered, and Foundling makes his way back to Fulgrim Tower with the final gland. Upon arriving at the tower, Foundling finds a familiar presence. Hattern has returned. He calls Foundling Dreamer and remarks that they finally meet in the flesh again, which I'm a little dubious about. They are together in the physical world, yes, but he's got a Sester Ganessa aura going on, and in just a minute here I'll be talking to him wearing his own flesh. Either way, Hattern has returned because he's done all that he could to prepare Foundling. He's ready to confront his final dream, the one that made him flee this tower all those years ago. Hattern and Foundling spar in the reverie one final time, with Hattern wielding his personal weapon, the Axatana. Upon being defeated, Hattern gives up his mortal shell. Unlike his dream years ago, Hattern is no longer afraid and gives Foundling his flesh willingly. Back in the physical world, Hattern also gives Foundling his swords, saying that he no longer needs them, that it's his time to rest, to finally sleep without dreams. Hattern, the man who first found the seeds of infinity, who is guided by Vatra to cultivate the seedlings that would become the Revered, and who raised the Foundling who would harvest them, is finally at rest. Hattern was a flawed man, but he was driven by forces beyond himself, and I believe he ultimately did things exactly according to a plan that was not of his own making. Vatra has been the invisible hand moving everything forward. Hattern explicitly stated that Vatra sent him to the temple of her worshippers to deliver the Revered who would birth Foundling and his twin sister through the stone ritual birth. The dreams Hattern and Foundling shared in the reverie are likely through the influence of Vatra, who I believe wanted him prepared for when the time was right. Not only does Hattern teach Foundling to wield weapons, but Hattern is the only other being we see who can harden, an ability that was said to be inherited by Foundling through their mother. As discussed, Twin Sister and Foundling are offspring of Vatra, birthed through the Revered by stone birth ritual. I believe it was Vatra who gave Hattern the ability to harden within the reverie, to train Foundling not only to use weapons, but to control his ability to harden. And I think Vatra did all of this because it was always her intent for Foundling to harvest the sacred glands from the Revered. Through the larval form of the Mouth of Infinity, Hattern and the Architect were given visions of the Seat of Infinity that was to be built. This could have been directly from the larva, but I think it was a vision communicated through the larva by the Infinite as part of a larger plan. It was through this inscrutable temple that Solomon, the old prisoner, and Sester Ganessa would all be reborn, all key figures in Vatra's plan. Solomon says in the Accretion of Dominance,
"Fate is not ours to defy, only to fulfill. You're chosen, as am I, brother. As is the unborn, ordained by the infinite. Perhaps you'll understand one day. In death, I shall find a new purpose. And your purpose, twisted and malevolent as you are, will light the way.
Solomon was a scholar who called the clergy of the Seat of Infinity charlatans and sycophants who believed that the revered and devout could be redeemed. So when he says that he, his brother, and Foundling are chosen, ordained by the Infinite, it's a matter of scholarship, not religion for Solomon. And if Solomon believes it's the Infinite guiding their purpose, and it's Vatra guiding the Foundling, then I think it's reasonable to suggest that Vatra may either be part of the guiding force of the Infinite or the Infinite itself. So then what have Solomon and the old prisoner been chosen for? What is Vatra's ultimate plan? To answer that, let's take a look at the endings for the Virtuous Cycle in the main game. For the Virtuous Cycle, Twin Sister asks us to finish the work Solomon started by finding the lost seeds of infinity that Hattern absconded with into the Reverie. To do this, Foundling must fight through a Reverie version of Fulgrim, culminating in a face-off against corrupted versions of the Shells. Defeating them retrieves one of the lost Seeds of Infinity. Unfortunately, Hattern was thorough, and the first 6 seeds that Foundling retrieves aren't viable for Twin Sister's purpose. The 7th seed, though, is viable, containing true nectar, and giving it to Twin Sister gives her what she needs to ascend.
What a wonder, this precious little thing. So much potential. I can feel it. Can't you? There's something left. A remnant of nectar. True nectar. What did Solomon once call it? A fragile vessel for the divine. Yes, that's it. Tell me, do you believe we can ascend? As do I, brother. What else can we do but believe? Now, it's time I stretch my wings. Do not worry. I am here. I am everywhere. It's as if 1,000 eyes have opened, and I can see through them all. I shall try to wake them, to redeem them, to mend what's broken deep inside. But something else has twisted them. They're more broken than you or I.
Twin Sister could see through Foundling's eyes through their connection, and upon ascending, this power has increased 1,000-fold. Solomon believed that through Twin Sister, the revered and devout could be redeemed, and her ascension is a realization of that, or at least a start. She senses that something else has twisted them, that they're broken deep inside, but she will strive to wake them to fully realize Solomon's work. I believe this was Vatra's plan for Twin Sister, to see her ascend using Seeds of Infinity, to use her ability to see through the eyes of others and help mend what's broken within them. This was achieved through Hattern and Solomon, with Hattern's departure acting as a catalyst for Solomon to realize that the Seeds of Infinity could be used in Twin Sister's ascension. But that's only half of the story, and it's time to talk about the end of Mortal Shell and Vatra's plan for the old prisoner and Foundling.
Who would have thought one so naive could endure such hardship to deliver this final plan? Yet, it is I who will ascend, and not those who are worshipped. Hand it over, and claim the honor to witness what's true. Thank you. Ah, yes. I feel my wings unfolding, body burgeoning, eyes opening as if for the first time. I see now your malform, misguided, an empty shell, nothing but flesh and instinct without purpose. You've been misled by false idol, fed the scraps of hope until your senses dulled and softened. But I know these these lies have left you desperate, hungering for more, I shall give you a chance at redemption to know the truth, if even for just a fleeting instant as you bask in my grandeur. Come forth and bear witness to my ascension. It's time. I must spread my wings.
The old prisoner has finally accomplished what he envisioned so long ago, extracting the true nectar from the sacred glands of the Revered. He chastises Foundling for being naive, calling him an empty shell without instinct and purpose. The dialogue of Twin Sister and the old prisoner are similar once they have extracted the true nectar. They both describe spreading their wings and opening their eyes. The old prisoner doesn't get a lightning bolt but simply disappears, and Foundling can enter a hole where the old prisoner was once held. Foundling is transported to the Reverie where he finds the old prisoner, now unchained.
It's all wrong. The visions have dissolved into darkness. There is no ascension, only an endless abyss, growing deeper and deeper as I stretch my wings uselessly. I've fallen into a sea of shadows. I remember warmth and light, but even that is fading. The visions weren't for me. They were for you. Are you not meant for this blighted place after all? But why should you get to escape, while the rest of us remain mired in this miserable pit? It's senseless, this injustice. If I can't ascend, neither will you. No one will.
The visions were never for the old prisoner, but for Foundling. To quote Solomon, "And your purpose, twisted and malevolent as you are, will light the way." The old prisoner's purpose, though misled, was to guide the Foundling in collecting the sacred glands and extract the true nectar so that he may ascend. And Solomon, whose work led Twin Sister to ascend, was also responsible for creating the true nectar that transformed his brother and gave him the visions. As I've stated, I think this was Vatra's, the Infinite's, plan from the start. The seeds of infinity fell from the heavens and were discovered by Hattern, and as they rapidly grew, Vatra gave Hattern visions of what to do with the seedlings, leading them to the creation of the Revered and their temples. Around the same time, she instructed Hattern to take a fourth unborn to her servants, and they burrowed her deep within the bowels of the earth to have Vatra's offspring through stone birth, a ritual the goddess had already seeded within her followers. The Revered and their glands developed, influencing humanity and influenced by humanity in a symbiotic process. Meanwhile, Foundling and Twin Sister grew within their stone mother's womb, and key figures were put into place. Hattern and Solomon formed a partnership. The old prisoner glimpsed the unknowable and was transfigured. Sister Ganessa and Teal fell in love, a romance that would end with Ganessa as a phantom to guide Foundling, and Teal as one of his mortal shells. The stories of Eredrim and Haros unfolded, with Eredrim's corpse awaiting its awakening by Foundling, and Haros arriving for the twins' birth to deliver the unborn twins to Hattern. Solomon connected with Twin Sister, and the slumbering Foundling connected with Hattern, and the seeds of their ascension were planted. Solomon saw hope in Twin Sister, a means for kindred evolution through her ascension. Hattern put his resolve into Foundling, training him within the Reverie to harden and wield weapons. In his final dream with Foundling, Hattern witnessed Foundling don his flesh's armor, and it might have been the very dream in the Reverie that taught Foundling how to inhabit a shell ahead of his birth. This dream scared Hattern, causing him to flee with the remaining seeds of infinity. This upset Solomon, but it was also a catalyst for him to realize that the seeds of infinity could be used to make Twin Sister ascend. And then time passed. The old prisoner arrived at the tower. Solomon died. Foundling continued to develop, as did the sacred glands. We don't know if Foundling finally awoke because he was ready, the Revered were ripe for harvest, or simply because that's when Vatra decided it was time. But Foundling awoke, guided by the old prisoner to collect the glands, and he did. And it was all in setting up the ascension of Foundling. With the old prisoner defeated, Foundling can now ascend. If the player chooses not to ascend, Foundling's returned back to Fulgrim, and when he returns he'll have to fight the old prisoner again. If the player does choose to ascend, Foundling pulls out the old prisoner's gland, smashes it into the ground, anointing himself with true nectar. He then casts aside his shell and ascends. Credits roll and then New Game Plus starts. The game will replay as it did in New Game, with the exception of Sester Ganessa's initial dialogue.
Pray, what wayward spirit beckons? Oh, it's you. Welcome back, Foundling. Yes, it's all happening again. This is the burden of immortality. Toil without end. Our spirits fragmented by the profane eternities. But there's comfort, even a certain pleasure in ritual. Where were we? Oh, yes. Sip this and you'll see. Yes, taste the truth.
Immortality is toil without end to relive the same events endlessly. What a gut punch of a footnote. But on the other hand, it's so interesting how the structure of Mortal Shell as a game plays into both fate and nihilism within the narrative. Despite the nigh invisible hand of Vatra putting all of this in motion, Foundling has choices. We've discussed the Baghead ending, in which Foundling can choose to spend his days playing the lute and watching Baghead eat rats and drink, but there's also a choice at the very end when Foundling can choose to ascend or not. It's a gameplay consideration, but it was a decision to let the player choose this moment to end the game or not, and either choice will roll credits. Cold Symmetry could have warned the player before going into the hole to fight the old prisoner and made that a point of no return, but they chose to do it after defeating him on the precipice of ascending. Mortal Shell is thematically and narratively about the unbending nature of fate, but there are moments that subvert that and offer another path. But as much as choosing to ascend is a gameplay convenience that narratively suggests Foundling has a level of choice, the decision to include New Game Plus is then justified narratively by the massively existential feeling reveal that immortality is toil without end. While mechanically it's the opposite of the non-standard Baghead ending that ends the game early, thematically it's similar in that it's presenting the ultimate meaninglessness of Foundling's actions, while suggesting the absurdist perspective that meaning is what we make it, and that there is comfort and pleasure in ritual. I also think this is ultimately retconned a bit with the premise of Mortal Shell 2, but that is a discussion to be had in a video about the sequel. And that is the story of Mortal Shell. As I said at the beginning, there's some gaps in the story and lore as presented, so there's room for different interpretations and ideas. In this video I've provided sources for the information presented and made it clear when I'm speculating, so that you can look at the facts and potentially reach different conclusions when interpretation is required, and I'd be happy to read your thoughts in the comments. I hope this has provided insight into the story of Mortal Shell, refreshing your understanding of the events of the first game or catching you up for Mortal Shell 2. If it has, please give the video a like, and if you're on mobile, consider hyping this video, as that does a lot to help boost it in the recommendations. And if you want more Mortal Shell content, please subscribe, as I'll certainly be discussing Mortal Shell 2 when it comes out. And check out the channel for videos about other Soulslikes and Metroidvanias, such as Blasphemous 1 and 2, which I've discussed a whole lot on the channel. As always, thanks for your support, thanks to Baghead for being best friends forever, and thanks for watching.